It began with a whisper, a small, harmless thing that no one paid much attention to. In the corridors of the prestigious Orion Foundation, where glass walls gleamed and reputations were guarded like crown jewels, whispers often came and went. But this one lingered, coiling through the air like smoke, refusing to dissipate. Ethan Ward was a name synonymous with integrity. For 15 years, he had led the foundation with an iron spine and a velvet voice. His speeches inspired, his vision transformed lives, and his moral compass was said to be unshakable. Employees spoke his name with reverence. Politicians sought his counsel. Newspapers hailed him as the last honest man in leadership. He had built a fortress of credibility around himself brick by brick until the world believed he was incapable of deceit. But fortresses are not undone by armies. They crumble from within. The lie began in the smallest of ways, with a misplaced grant report. One of the foundation's programs, an initiative for rural education, had gone over budget by several $1,000,000. Ethan had known about it. His finance director had come to him, trembling, explaining that the funds had been redirected to a project that failed spectacularly. Admitting it would mean public embarrassment, a dent in the foundation's immaculate record, and questions about his leadership. He could have told the truth then. He could have faced the storm and walked through it. But he didn't. He told himself it was just a temporary adjustment, a single altered figure on a document that no one outside the boardroom would ever see. A small, necessary deception to protect the greater good. He signed the false report. That night, he couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the moment he'd bent the truth, over and over, until it became almost unrecognizable to him. He told himself that everyone did it, that this was not dishonesty, merely strategy. But even as he drifted to sleep, he knew something had shifted. The lie grew roots. A junior auditor, meticulous and ambitious, noticed the discrepancy months later. She sent a quiet email to her supervisor, who hesitated before forwarding it to another department. Within weeks, the rumor began that something wasn't quite right with the foundation's accounts. Ethan dismissed it at first, confident in his charm and control. When journalists started calling, he smiled, denied, and redirected. His calm demeanor only reinforced his reputation, until one persistent reporter refused to let go. The story broke on a cold morning in March. The headline was brutal: "Integrity in Question. Orion Foundation's Finances Under Scrutiny." Ethan's face, always so composed, looked strangely hollow on the front page. He held a press conference, voice steady, eyes unblinking, as he denied any wrongdoing. He said the numbers were misinterpreted. He said he had full confidence in his team. He lied again, and this time it came easier. But truth, once buried, never stays quiet. The investigation deepened. Leaked emails surfaced. A digital signature on a falsified report was traced directly to Ethan's account. The foundation's board turned on him with cold precision. The same colleagues who once toasted his leadership now avoided his gaze. The media, once his ally, feasted on his downfall. Every past decision was re-examined, every speech replayed, every word dissected for hypocrisy. And the whisper that had begun in the hallways became a roar. When the truth finally came out, that Ethan himself had authorized the false report, he stood before the cameras, stripped of the confidence that had once defined him. His voice faltered. He tried to explain that he hadn't meant to deceive anyone, that he had acted out of pressure, out of fear, out of the desperate need to protect something larger than himself. But no one wanted explanations anymore. They wanted someone to blame. The board forced his resignation. Sponsors withdrew. The foundation's name, once synonymous with virtue, was now tangled with scandal. The programs he had built collapsed one after another, as if his fall had triggered an invisible chain reaction. People who had believed in him felt betrayed, not because he had failed, but because he had lied. In the weeks that followed, Ethan withdrew from the world. His house, once filled with guests and laughter, grew silent. The awards that lined his shelves now mocked him. He read the headlines again and again, trying to understand how one small decision, a single lie, had unraveled everything he had built. He remembered his father's words, spoken years ago when he was just starting out. Truth isn't a virtue when it's easy. It's a test when it costs you something. At the time, he had nodded solemnly, certain he understood. Now, he realized he never had. Months later, a journalist who had covered his downfall found him living in a coastal town under a different name. She asked him if he regretted it. The lie, the cover-up, the destruction that followed. Ethan stared out at the sea for a long time before answering. It wasn't the lie that destroyed me, he said quietly. It was believing I could control it. The journalist left him there, sitting by the waves, a man unrecognizable from the leader he once was. The world had moved on, as it always does. The Orion Foundation had rebranded under new management, its history rewritten to erase him almost entirely. But somewhere, in the silence between the tides, the ghost of that one small lie still lingered, proof that moral collapse rarely begins with corruption or malice, but with something far more human, the belief that a little dishonesty won't matter. And in Ethan Ward's case, it had cost him everything. The weeks following Ethan Ward's resignation unfolded like the slow decay of a grand building. From the outside, the structure still looked impressive. The nameplate on the Orion Foundation's headquarters still glimmered in the sunlight, but inside, everything was rotting. Employees left in waves. Donors vanished. The air, once filled with purpose and polished civility, grew heavy with distrust. Ethan watched it all from afar. He followed the news like a mourner watching a funeral from the shadows. Each article, each broadcast tore another piece from him. There was anger in some corners, people calling him a fraud, a hypocrite, but worse were those who spoke of him with disappointment. He was the one we trusted. Those words haunted him more than any accusation could. He had spent his life building a reputation carved from discipline and restraint. Every decision, every speech, every public act had been measured to reflect one image, a man of principle. But now that image lay shattered, and behind it there was nothing left but the raw, unfiltered truth of who he really was, a man capable of rationalizing dishonesty when it suited him. It wasn't only his career that crumbled. His personal life followed quietly behind. His wife, Claire, had stood beside him during the first storm, insisting that the truth would clear his name. But as the evidence mounted, as Ethan's own lies to her came to light, how he had assured her that everything was fine, that the reports were clean, that the accusations were nonsense, something inside her broke. The day she left, she didn't shout or cry. She simply packed a single suitcase and said, "I could have forgiven failure, Ethan, but not deceit." He didn't try to stop her. His son refused his calls. His closest friend, a board member he had mentored for years, avoided him. In the quiet that followed, Ethan found himself living in a small rented flat overlooking the sea, where the only sound was the constant rhythm of the waves. He tried to write again, to put his thoughts in order, to find meaning in the wreckage, but every page began with the same sentence. It was supposed to be just one lie. As months turned into years, the world forgot his name. The Orion Foundation recovered under new leadership. A few documentaries revisited the scandal now and then, painting him as a tragic cautionary tale, a man undone by pride. Ethan never defended himself. He had come to realize that there was no defense that mattered. What haunted him most was not the loss of power or reputation, but the memory of the moment before the lie, the instant when he had stood at the edge of a decision and stepped over it. He remembered the silence in the room, the sound of his pen scratching across paper, and the faint, almost imperceptible thrill of thinking he had outsmarted consequence. That thrill, he knew now, had been the first crack in his soul. In time, he began to wander the town where he lived, speaking little, blending into the anonymity he once feared. Sometimes people recognized him. Older men who remembered his speeches, young idealists who had once interned under him. Their faces would flicker with a mix of shock and pity. Ethan would smile faintly, offer a nod and move on. One evening, he found himself in a small cafe, listening to two college students arguing about ethics. One insisted that in leadership, sometimes a strategic lie was necessary for the greater good. The other disagreed, saying truth was the only foundation strong enough to bear power. Ethan listened quietly, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee gone cold. When they noticed him watching, one of them laughed nervously. "You look like you've got an opinion, sir," she said. Ethan met her eyes and smiled, a tired, knowing smile. "I used to think truth was a tool," he said softly. "Something you could shape when the world got complicated. But it isn't. It's the ground you stand on. Once you dig under it, you start to sink." The students exchanged puzzled looks. He didn't explain further. He simply stood, left a tip on the table, and walked out into the gray dusk. Years later, after his death, a small notebook was found among his belongings. Inside were pages of reflections, no self-defense, no bitterness, just quiet admissions of what he had learned too late. One entry read, "The lie didn't destroy me because it was discovered. It destroyed me because I built my peace upon it. Every time I looked in the mirror, I had to convince myself I was still the man the world believed I was. The effort of pretending was the real punishment." The notebook was published quietly by a small press, sold in modest numbers, but it found an audience among young leaders, idealists, and those on the brink of moral compromise. His words became a strange sort of redemption, not the public kind, not a return to grace, but a warning carved in honesty. Ethan Ward was no longer the symbol of integrity. He was something else entirely, a reminder that integrity, once fractured, cannot be mended by reputation or success. It lives or dies in the smallest choices, the moments no one sees. And so the story of Ethan Ward, the man who once stood for virtue, became the story of how easily virtue can fall, not through greed or corruption, but through one simple lie whispered into the mirror by a man who believed he would never be caught. The world had moved on, but the echo of his downfall remained, drifting like the whisper that had started it all, a quiet, fragile sound that warned anyone who listened that morality is never lost all at once. It erodes one justified lie at a time.